Okay, so in this recording, we're going to learn how to set up Visual Studio Code to work with Jupyter Notebooks, to work with Python scripts, and to integrate these notebooks and scripts that we write with GitHub, and then also how to pull from GitHub repositories and access other people's code so that you can modify it and make your own changes. For example, it would be nice if all of you knew how to access the data or the scripts and the notebooks from my course GitHub repository, right? So the first step is to open up VS Code. I've been working on it, as you can see, but let me just go ahead and say I'm going to start a new, maybe I want new window, okay? I'm just going to minimize this over here. And on the screen, you'll see, I think that if you open up VS Code and you've never started a project or anything like that, it should look something like this. Now, you might not see this git clone repository stuff and things like that. You need to verify, and I think that if you install VS Code on a Mac or Linux system, you'll have, well, even without VS Code, Mac and Linux, they will have Git already installed. You might have to update it or something like that, but you should have access to it. On Windows, I'm not so sure, but we'll find out as we go through this lesson. And for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, I have to thank the students that are going to be talking with me through this, because they volunteered to be here, and our conversations might be useful for you guys out there listening or watching. So if you don't see the git clone or clone git repository right here, you definitely will see it with this little button right here. Okay. So this button will give you the option of opening a folder or cloning a repository. Now, what I would like you to do, if you're watching this and you're trying to just get started, we're only going to cover the simple things, but this is just for getting started. Go to your GitHub account. Okay. And then once you're here, let's just go ahead and say, let me look at my repositories real fast. Okay, so go to your repositories and then create a new one. I just want to check and see if this works for all of my students. So create a new repository, and I'll call this say sample indie. That's the name of the course without the numbers, and I'll say repo, whatever, just like that. So I'm going to give my students a few seconds to do that. Now, what we're doing right now is we're essentially, and I apologize if I'm saying the incorrect terms for these things, because that's just the way I am with this stuff. But essentially, we're on our GitHub account, which is hosted on GitHub. We're going to create a new folder or directory repository that is hosted on GitHub, right? Now, this is different from Git. Git is something that's on your machine, but we can access this repository that's hosted by GitHub via Git VS Code. So if you go to your GitHub account, make a new repository, maybe just give it this exact same name so that you're on the same page with me, okay? Now, down here, we're gonna go ahead and make this public. I'm gonna click on add a README file. Very important to have a README file, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then choose a license. So underneath the license, I would suggest maybe choosing the MIT license. And this is just a precaution. If anyone uses the code on this repository, that you're not liable. And there's a few different licenses, but generally speaking, just choose MIT. Okay. So we have a name, which is underneath my GitHub name. So this would be, okay. It's going to be public. I'm going to choose to have GitHub add a README file, and I'm going to have a license, an MIT license. All right. So students, have any of you made it this far? You can
Yes.
go.
Yes.
All right. So let's go ahead and click create repository. All right. So this will now appear under your account. And you see that it generated a README file and you have a sample ND repo. It's the name of whatever you type, but we can change this later. Now, the next step is to look at the code here. We want to clone this code to our local machine. Okay. There are code files here. Like, for example, this README file is a code file, right? And then we have a license. And we want to bring all of this to our machine and make edits on it and then push it back to GitHub so that others can view it. So actually, before I copy this, all of you, all of my students should go into VS Code, this window here. And then there's a little extensions button right here. Click on that extensions button. And we're going to add a few, well, not add a few, we're going to add one for right now. Type in Python. Okay. And then the very top entry should be the Microsoft Python extension. It has 49 million downloads and all kinds of good stars. You need to install this. I already have it installed, but if you don't have it installed, install it. So students, how many of you have installed this extension?
I have it.
I have it.
I have it.
All
I
right.
have it.
Okay, so when you install this extension, it will allow us to program with Python in VS Code. And also, it allows VS Code to run Jupyter Notebooks. Now, back when I started using VS Code, there was a separate extension in order to allow VS Code to run Jupyter Notebooks. But when you do this now, you have access to Python coding and the syntax highlighting, the auto completion of code in scripts, and you also have access to Jupyter Notebooks. It's really great. Okay. And out of all of the IDEs, VS Code is probably my favorite. There are a few others that I used to use. For example, Sublime was an IDE that I used for a while. And then a long time ago, and this is kind of, I don't feel that old, but it sounds old saying it out loud. I used to use Emacs as my Python script editor a long time ago. But VS Code has changed everything really, and I think that it's a great thing to use. And it's kind of the standard, I think, in data science. Unless you're kind of like a masochist and you like to hurt yourself and you use another thing called Vim, which even in VS Code, you can run Vim now. It's crazy. So make sure that you have this extension installed. Now, once you have that installed, go back to your little file guy here or click on this to say open folder or clone repository. And now go back to your GitHub repository sample ND repo. Click on code, click this, copy it, go to VS Code, click on clone repository. Inside of this little bar, paste, press enter. And this will open up your file system. And we want to clone this repository into a folder. So I want to go, for example, into documents, and then maybe I'll go into Rice Teaching, and then I'll make a new folder in here, and I'll just give this some title, sample. Actually, I will say, I'd like to give it the same name, sample ND repo. Okay, so I'm making a new folder, new directory. There it is, I'm inside of it. And now I'm going to click select repository location. Okay, so I'm going to open. I'm going to trust. And now you'll see that we are on our machine inside of our repository. It appears on the left-hand side if you click the little file button here. Okay. Now, this is exactly the same as this repo. Okay. There's a README file, and then there's also a license. Can't see the license here, but the README file is there. Okay. Now, suppose we wanted to change the name of this README file. Now, README files have the same syntax as the Markdown syntax I've been using in Jupyter Notebooks. So if you've looked at that, you know that the pound symbol here is the title. Okay, so I could say something like, I'm going to change this title to data science and machine learning. And then underneath that, I'll say something like, in this repository, we provide maybe various and or maybe I'll say scripts and Jupyter Notebooks illustrating data science and machine learning. Okay. Okay, so I've changed my README file. And in VS Code, you'll see this little white dot right there. That means that the current changes that I've made have not been saved. So I'm going to save this by saving it, or you could do File, Save. That's another way of doing it. I was using my keyboard to do that. So Command S or whatever, depending on the operating system that you're on. And notice when I saved it, the white dot went away as the first thing. And then the next thing was that I see that my little GitHub button right here, there's a change. See that little one right there? So what I can do is click on that. And then this is the message that I want to type in, or if I want to commit something. For now, to keep things simple, we just want to commit our changes. So I have to do my little special Apple button, enter. So that's what I'm going to do here. And then it asks me, there are no stage changes to commit. Would you like to stage all of your changes? I only changed here. And for now, you can just do that. So I'm going to just click yes. And then up here is a message that I want to attach with the changes that I've made. I've only made changes to the README file, so I can say initial changes made to the root, so the README file at the root of my directory. Okay, so I have a nice message to accompany the changes that I've made. All right, so I've typed that out. You can type whatever you want, whatever it is. Press enter. And then here, I see a little button saying sync changes. Now the changes that I just made are ready to be pushed to the GitHub repository. Okay, so I'm going to click on sync changes. Do that. It's asking if VS Code wants to periodically get changes from the remote repository. This is something that's common when you're working with a team of developers. In this case, it's just ourselves, so let's not do that. Just ask me later. All right, so now notice that there's no red marker over my source control button, my GitHub button. And if I come back over here to GitHub and I reload it, notice that the README file has changed. Okay. Students, any luck with that? Did I lose y'all?
I was kind of falling a little bit behind, so I might need a moment.
Okay. Well, while I'm waiting on my students, just notice that these changes have been made, okay? And I see that the message that I put here initial changes made to the root README file. This was done approximately 1 minute ago. Okay. So this, for now, is going to be the easiest way for you to update your repositories for this. Well, it's not the easiest way, but it's the simplest way using VS Code to update your repositories to slowly build up a nice looking professional repository of all of the things that we will cover during the semester. And it's as easy as just currently just clicking on this little button, adding all the things you've changed, and then pushing it to GitHub. Now, this is not making use of the true power of version control. We're not branching anything or any of that fancy stuff. We're literally just using VS Code to update our GitHub repository. Later in the semester, we will talk a little bit about branching and version control and those kinds of things. But really, for now, I just want all my students to be able to modify their GitHub page, their repository for this course. You can do this manually also. You don't have to use VS Code to change anything. You can add code manually by just clicking this button and upload files, and whatever Jupyter notebooks or Python scripts you have on your computer, you can upload those files and they will appear on your repository. So that's another way of doing it. But I think that as students in a graduate level data science course, you should just try your best to get comfortable with using VS Code to push these changes in making comments on the changes that you commit and push. All right, students, where y'all at? Do I have any errors or issues yet?
No.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So I wasn't following along, and can you explain the steps that you did after you changed your Markdown file to push it to GitHub, or like what the steps you took?
Yeah. So I'll do some more steps just to illustrate what I was about to do. Okay. So suppose like you didn't change the README or whatever, or maybe you did. Suppose next you want to add a specific folder to contain certain things. For example, maybe you want to add to your repository Python crash course materials, so that when people come across your repository, you would like to have notebooks and folders available to them to quickly look at the code, the bare minimum of code that they need in order to do the other data science-y stuff on your repository. So click on your little file manager thing here. This is currently there's only a license and a README file. Up here, let's go ahead and make a new folder. So this little button, click it. Give this a name, maybe Python learning. Yeah, Python learning, that's it. Notice the underscore. So I'm gonna press enter. So now this is a new directory in our root directory. Click on the little down arrow right there. And you see that there's nothing in that folder. But we can add a Python script to that folder, or we can add a Jupyter notebook. So notice that it's highlighted right now. And then I'm going to click on this little button right here that says new file. And now in that directory, I'm going to make a new file. Since we've been using nothing but Jupyter notebooks so far, this is what I'm going to make. I'm going to say hello _world. And now I'm going to give it the extension that I want, a Jupyter notebook extension. So .ipynb. So ipynb, so it's a Jupyter, that's the extension for Jupyter notebooks. Notice the little Jupyter symbol that appears right there. Press enter. And you should see a Jupyter notebook cell appear in front of you. Now, I have many different versions of Python on my computer, and I also have Julia on my computer. I have kernels for Jupyter Notebooks for all of these different languages and versions. So what you should do is come over here and say select kernel if it doesn't default to Anaconda, for example. You can select the kernel or the language you would like to use by clicking this button. And then all of you should have Anaconda installed. So hopefully the Anaconda Python version appears up here somewhere. I have all kinds of different ways. If you see the Anaconda one, pick that. If you see Python 3 anywhere, pick that. But currently use Anaconda. So I click that, and now that is the type of Python, that's the version of Python that I'm going to be available to use in this notebook. So then I'm going to type print hello world. I'm going to run that cell, press Shift Enter, and it works. So how many people were able to print hello world in their Jupyter notebook?
Yep.
Okay. Well, if there's any issues, I'll discuss them in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and show how to push this now to GitHub. So notice that the little white dot is on my notebook script. That means I need to save it. So I'm going to do the keyboard command for save, or you could have done file save. Okay. Now the little white dot is gone and it's been saved. Now, if I look at my version control button over here, my source control, I see that there's been something saved and new. The little red dot with one change. Okay, so I've made a new script inside of this folder. Go over here, click that. I'm going to press the fancy Apple button, enter. I'm going to stage all of the changes I've made. I'm going to make a commit statement up here, a message to go along with this commit. I'm going to say new, I'm going to say new Python learning directory made and new Jupyter notebook made, or something like that. I don't know, some brief description of what happened. Now I've typed out my message, I press enter, and then I see my sync changes button over here. Now, in order for this to appear in my GitHub account, I need to sync these changes. So I'm going to click it. This action will push and pull commits to and from the origin main. We don't know what that is. You don't need to worry about it yet. Later in the semester, we'll talk about it. But for now, just click OK. Syncing, done. Notice the little red marker has gone away. And now, if I reload my GitHub page, where is it? Oh, I didn't give it time to load. Where did it go? Here it is right here. Okay. Oh, I just didn't click view code. So I look at view code and I look at my directory here. It's the same thing. Python learning folder, license, readme. Python learning folder, license, readme. Same exact thing. If I look at what's in Python learning, it's this hello world notebook. And if I look over here, there's a hello world notebook. And if I open that up, there it goes. Same exact thing. Okay. So that's, now that you know these steps, you should be able to, in a very basic way, start adding notebooks and Python scripts to your GitHub repository. I think that that should be it for this recording, and I will probably make another recording on customizing the look and feel of VS Code so that you feel comfortable when using it. All right, I'll end it at that.